They packed their bags for joy, but returned in silence or never returned at all. From a family getaway in Yosemite to a graduation trip that vanished into thin air, to a honeymoon that ended beneath the waves. Stay with us to the end. Case 3 will leave you breathless. Case 1. The Sund Family. Murders, 1999. Yosemite Vacation. Yosemite National Park is known for its towering cliffs, cascading waterfalls, and serene wilderness. But in 1999, it became the backdrop of a terrifying story, one that began with a simple family vacation and ended in horror. What happened to the Sund family and their young guest would stain Yosemite's natural beauty with a darkness it never asked for. Carol Sund was a devoted mother and successful businesswoman from Eureka, California. That February, she planned a trip to Yosemite with her 15-year-old daughter Julie and Silvina Peloso, a bright 16-year-old exchange student from Argentina who had been staying with the family. The getaway was meant to be a chance for the girls to explore California's most iconic park, an adventure in nature full of photo ops and bonding time. They arrived on February 12, 1999, checking into the Cedar Lodge in El Portal, a modest hotel just outside Yosemite's entrance. It was the off-season, so things were quiet. The girls excitedly called friends back home, describing their surroundings. There were no signs of trouble, no warnings, just trees, trails, and fresh mountain air. And then silence. When Carol failed to pick up her husband at the airport on February 16th, as planned, panic set in. Days passed without word from the group. Phones went unanswered. Credit cards went unused. The family reported them missing, and local law enforcement joined forces with the FBI and park rangers to launch a search. Despite the scale of the effort, they found nothing. It was as if the three had simply vanished. Weeks passed. The media ran headlines asking the same question, "Where are the Sunds and Silvina?" Billboards went up. Volunteers canvassed nearby towns. The Sund family offered a $250,000 reward. Rumors swirled about carjackings, kidnappings, even cults. Everyone wanted to believe the three were alive, perhaps lost, perhaps hiding. But deep down, dread was setting in. That dread turned into horror on March 18th. A man walking his dog down a remote logging road in Tuolumne County noticed something strange, a scorched car partially hidden in the brush. It was a rented Pontiac Grand Prix, the same vehicle the Sunds had been driving. When investigators arrived, they opened the trunk, and what they found inside confirmed every parent's worst nightmare. The burned remains of two bodies were discovered, later identified through dental records as Carol Sund and Silvina Peloso. Both had been bound and gagged, killed, and left to burn. One of them had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. The fire had been set intentionally, most likely to destroy evidence. But Julie Sund was not in the car. Hope sparked briefly. Maybe she had escaped. Maybe she was still alive. It didn't last. A week later, an anonymous letter was sent to the FBI. Inside was a crude hand-drawn map with a red X marked on it, accompanied by a chilling message. "We had fun with this one." The tip led agents to a rural area near Don Pedro Reservoir. There, they found Julie's body. She had been sexually assaulted and her throat slit. The letter's taunting tone added another layer of cruelty. Whoever had done this wasn't just a killer. He was a monster. The investigation ramped up with renewed urgency. The FBI turned their focus to staff at the Cedar Lodge, particularly those with access to guest rooms, and one name kept resurfacing: Carrie Stainer. Stainer was a handyman at the lodge. Quiet, polite, seemingly harmless. He kept to himself, cleaned rooms, did odd jobs. To many, he was just another face behind the scenes. But he had a past that few knew. Stainer was the older brother of Stephen Stainer, a boy who had been abducted in 1972 and held captive for 7 years before heroically escaping. Stephen's story had captured national attention, even becoming the subject of a made-for-TV movie. But Carrie. He faded into the background, a shadow in the story of his younger brother's survival. In reality, Carrie Stainer was deeply troubled. He had long struggled with violent fantasies, sexual compulsions, and delusions. He had never fully processed the trauma in his family or sought the help he needed. Instead, he drifted through life quietly spiraling. By July 1999, with the triple murders still under investigation, Carrie Stainer struck again. Joy Ruth Armstrong, a 26-year-old naturalist working with children at the Yosemite Institute, was preparing for a short trip when she disappeared. Friends found her cabin empty, her belongings still packed. The next day, her decapitated body was discovered near a creek not far from where she lived. This time there were clues. Tire tracks, witnesses who'd seen a blue 1979 International Scout parked nearby. The vehicle was traced to Stainer. He fled, but was eventually found at a nudist resort in Sacramento. When questioned, Carrie Stainer confessed not just to Joey's murder, but to the killings of Carol Silvina and Julie as well. He spoke calmly, without remorse, detailing the attacks like someone recounting a story, not a crime. He explained how he had entered their motel room under the guise of needing repairs, tied them up, and killed them one by one. Silvina, he said, had fought back. Julie, he claimed, had begged for her life. He admitted to sexually assaulting Julie before killing her. He didn't blame drugs or voices. He blamed himself, his fantasies, his darkness, his inability to stop. The confession stunned the country. How could someone so mild-mannered, so unremarkable, commit such horrifying acts? What twisted logic had turned this man into a predator hiding in plain sight? Stainer was indicted on 4 counts of murder. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but his confessions and the overwhelming evidence left no room for doubt. In 2002, he was sentenced to death. He remains on death row in San Quentin State Prison, a place where California's most dangerous criminals spend their final years. The Sund family. Silvina's loved ones and Joey's parents never got their daughters back. But they got answers. And in a world where so many disappearances go unresolved, that matters. Still, the scars remain. The Cedar Lodge continues to operate, though many guests avoid talking about its past. For years, the memory of what happened there lingered in the walls. The trails of Yosemite, once purely places of wonder, carry a darker energy now. What should have been a peaceful vacation became a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. And for every parent waving goodbye as their teenager sets off on a trip, there's a lingering fear whispered deep in the heart. What if they don't come back? Case 2. The disappearance of Natalie Holloway. In the summer of 2005, Natalie Holloway was on the cusp of a new chapter in life. Having just graduated with honors from Mountain Brook High School in Alabama, she joined over 120 of her classmates on a celebratory graduation trip to the Caribbean island of Aruba. It was supposed to be a week of sun laughter and memories, a reward for years of hard work and teenage milestones. But on May 30th, 2005, the final day of the trip, Natalie vanished. That evening, she was last seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's, a popular nightclub, around 1:30 a.m., accompanied by a local young man named Joran van der Sloot and 2 Surinamese brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpo. According to her friends, Natalie had been drinking, but she was in good spirits. She never returned to her hotel. By the next morning, panic set in. Her chaperones alerted Aruban authorities, and her family was informed. Within 24 hours, her mother, Beth Holloway, arrived in Aruba with a team of friends and quickly began the search. Joran van der Sloot, a Dutch national living in Aruba, became the prime suspect almost immediately. He was 17 at the time. Along with the Calpo brothers, he was interrogated multiple times. Their stories shifted often. First, they claimed to have dropped Natalie off at her hotel. Then they said they left her at the beach near the Holiday Inn. Joran later claimed he left her alone on the sand and never saw her again. Despite extensive land, sea, and aerial searches, no trace of Natalie was found. Divers combed the ocean floor. Volunteers scoured remote parts of the island. The FBI assisted, but every lead went cold. The investigation became one of the most widely publicized missing person cases in American media history. News outlets camped in Aruba. The story captivated millions not just because of the tropical setting or the young victim, but because of the growing sense that justice was slipping through the cracks. Joran was arrested multiple times over the years, but was consistently released due to lack of evidence. Public suspicion was overwhelming, but without a body, without a clear crime scene, the case stalled. In 2008, a Dutch journalist recorded Joran in a hidden camera interview appearing to confess that Natalie had died accidentally and he disposed of her body. But the statements were inconsistent and the evidence was insufficient to pursue charges. Then in 2010, Joran van der Sloot murdered another young woman, Stephanie Flores, a Peruvian student, inside a hotel room in Lima just 5 years after Natalie's disappearance. This time, the evidence was clear. Flores had been beaten and strangled. Security footage showed Joran entering and leaving the hotel. He was arrested and sentenced to 28 years in prison. The Holloway case, meanwhile, remained officially unsolved. In a shocking development in 2023, Joran finally confessed in a federal plea deal to Natalie's murder, admitting he had bludgeoned her after she refused his advances, then disposed of her body in the ocean. The confession was part of an extortion case. He had tried to sell the location of Natalie's remains to her mother years earlier for $250,000. Although his confession brought some closure, he still refused to provide precise details about the location of Natalie's body. For many, the damage had already been done. The years of uncertainty had taken an enormous toll on the Holloway family. Beth Holloway, who never gave up, became a symbol of resilience and a vocal advocate for missing persons everywhere. Natalie Holloway's disappearance reshaped how Americans viewed travel safety, especially for young women. Her story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in paradise, darkness can hide in plain sight. And though the waves of Aruba have long washed away the traces of that night, the story still echoes a haunting reminder of a life-stolen justice delayed and a family's unrelenting pursuit of truth. Case 3. The tragic death of Tina Watson. In October 2003, a newlywed couple from Alabama flew to Australia for their dream honeymoon. It was supposed to be a joyful celebration, a 2-week getaway filled with sunshine, scenic beauty, and unforgettable memories. But just 11 days into their marriage, one of them would be dead. What was meant to be the start of a lifetime together became an international investigation, shrouded in suspicion, betrayal, and a haunting silence beneath the sea. Tina Watson, 26, was a young woman with a gentle heart and a trusting nature. She had met Gabe Watson, a fellow student at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, through their shared church group. Their romance, while not particularly passionate or intense, had a kind of quiet compatibility. Friends described them as steady, if somewhat ordinary. Tina was cautious, often relying on Gabe for direction and support, especially when it came to adventurous activities. Gabe, on the other hand, was more confident sometimes, controlling but outwardly devoted. They were married on October 11, 2003, in a modest church ceremony attended by family and close friends. Just 2 days later, they boarded a flight to Australia. Their itinerary included sightseeing in Sydney and Melbourne, followed by a scuba diving trip at the Great Barrier Reef, a once-in-a-lifetime experience for the couple, especially Tina, who had only recently obtained her diving certification. The trip was going smoothly until October 22nd, the day of the dive. The couple had signed up with Mike Ball Dive Expeditions for a guided dive to the SS Yongala, a famous shipwreck off the coast of Queensland. The Yongala is a breathtaking dive site, but it's also known for strong currents and requires a level of skill and confidence underwater. Tina had logged just 5 dives before this. Gabe, though more experienced with around 55 logged dives, was not a certified rescue diver despite his later claims. On that fateful morning, the dive group boarded the spoilsport vessel and prepared to descend. According to the dive instructors and other divers present, there were no signs of trouble until suddenly there were. Barely 2 minutes into the dive, chaos broke out. Gabe surfaced in a panic, flailing and signaling for help. When crew members asked what was wrong, he struggled to speak. "My wife's down there." "She's not moving," he said. Rescue divers immediately plunged into the water. They found Tina lying motionless on the seabed about 30 meters down. Her eyes were open. Her regulator was out of her mouth. She was brought to the surface as quickly as possible, but it was too late. Tina was pronounced dead shortly after. The scene was baffling. Tina's death seemed sudden, inexplicable. There had been no entanglement, no equipment failure, and no sign of external injury. Gabe claimed she had panicked and knocked his mask off, causing him to ascend quickly for help. But the accounts from the dive crew didn't align with his story. And Tina's diving computer told a very different tale. The autopsy showed no heart condition, no underlying health issues that might have led to her death. What it did reveal, however, was a lack of air in her tank, suggesting she had stopped breathing well before she was found. Her dive computer data revealed that she had dropped rapidly without attempting to ascend or correct her position, almost as if she had been disabled or unconscious from the start. Then came a critical piece of evidence footage taken by other divers during the descent. In the background of one video, Gabe and Tina can be seen descending together. Moments later, Gabe is seen swimming away alone. No sign of distress, no attempt to signal for help, no indication of panic. Authorities began to scrutinize Gabe's actions both during and after the incident. He had refused to participate in Tina's rescue or help bring her body to the surface. He claimed he was too distraught to talk to investigators. And just days after her death, he returned to the U.S. without her body leaving her grieving parents to arrange the repatriation themselves. There were more disturbing revelations. Tina's father told police that before the wedding, Gabe had pressured Tina to increase her life insurance and name him as the sole beneficiary. Tina had refused. Gabe's behavior at the funeral also raised eyebrows. He had requested to pose with her body in the casket for a private photo. The case grew cold in Australia. Authorities believed they had enough to charge Gabe with manslaughter, accusing him of failing in his duty to help Tina during the dive. But without an extradition treaty in place at the time, they were stuck. Meanwhile, Gabe had returned to Alabama, resumed his life, and remarried. In 2008, Australia finally issued an arrest warrant. After lengthy negotiations, Gabe agreed to return voluntarily to face charges, but only after a plea deal was reached, he would plead guilty to a lesser charge of negligent manslaughter. In 2009, he was sentenced to 12 months in an Australian prison. He served just 18 months in total, including time on parole. But the story didn't end there. Back in the U.S., Alabama prosecutors filed their own murder charges, arguing that Gabe had planned to kill Tina all along for financial gain, or perhaps for darker, more personal reasons. However, when the case reached court in 2012, the judge dismissed it, citing lack of evidence and double jeopardy protections. Gabe walked free. To this day, the mystery of what really happened underwater remains unsolved. Was it an accident, as Gabe insisted, a tragic result of panic and inexperience? Or did he use the isolation of the deep sea to commit a crime he believed could never be proven? For Tina's family, there are no doubts. They believe she was murdered. They believe justice was never served. Her story stands as a chilling reminder in moments meant to be joyful evil can still find its way in. A dream honeymoon, a beautiful reef, and beneath the waves, a silence no one can break. If you want to keep uncovering the dark truths hidden behind the most ordinary moments, don't forget to subscribe to Roadside Tales. There's always another story waiting.